Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. Serious. People who have killed in self-defense. What's the thing that haunts you the most about the situation? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
The way his body crumpled and the gurgling sounds he made. I'd been stabbed, managed to get the knife from him, and stabbed him with it. Being that close and having the feeling of the knife in my hand, piercing his flesh, made it so much worse. It feels like stabbing an orange, a tiny bit of resistance then just sliding in. I would have rather had a gun. For anyone wondering, I was being jumped by him and 3 others. I guess he got carried away in the violence and stabbed me. The others ran away when I stabbed him. They were charged with his death. As a combat veteran at 19 years old, I had no problem pulling the trigger on guys that were shooting at us. Now, as a father of a young boy, I find myself thinking about the fact that sometime long before this person was in my crosshairs, he was someone's little boy who was raised by a mom who loved him, and I ended that life journey, and it makes me sad, and I think it always will. The people close to him didn't believe he could be a bad man. I had to leave my hometown because I couldn't get a job or be left alone after spending a couple of years in prison for a manslaughter. I didn't have $150,000 for lawyers. He was nice to everyone, but behind closed doors was an entirely different person, just a very few people knew. I abused my mom and myself mentally and physically for my entire childhood, until one day he actually tried to kill us, but I got him first. I don't know why that day he lost it worse than any other time, and I wonder every day why. And now I've developed a bunch of mental and physical health problems. The first shot hit him high in the sternum at about 8 feet, and a second at about 3 feet, right into the heart. The smell of everything. You never hear about any of that, and I spent 3 hours trying to wash the blood off. Dude was on PCP a day after doing 6 months for DV. He thought I was sleeping with his girlfriend because I was in her old apartment. She apparently had a restraining order on him. He had a pretty unhealthy knife on him and kept coming after the first shot. Connor said the first shot killed him. It would have taken about a minute. I had to get a new apartment in the same complex because of all the bodily fluids and equipment in the bedroom. Scary part, a friend who had done a tour in Nam told me the first one is either the hardest one or the easiest one. I almost didn't pull the trigger. Now, not a second thought, and that bothers me. I was slowing down my truck with my 3 kids in the back seat at a red light. There was an older car in front of me. A man in the car got out. He was pissed about something, which confused me. He just starts yelling and waving his hands like I'd done something to him. He kept yelling, "I'm gonna kill you," over and over. Then he started coming toward my truck and had a very large knife in his hand, so I unholstered my Glock from my waist, not expecting to use it at all. At first, he was just pacing back and forth near my truck, like he was amping himself up to do something. But then he started slamming a knife against the back window where my kids were. I yelled over and over to stop or I'd shoot him, but he didn't seem to care. He just kept stabbing the window. As soon as he cracked the glass with the knife, I unloaded 3 rounds into him, and he was down pretty quickly. He was DOA when the police got there. I'm haunted most by my kids having to experience the feeling of knowing some random man was trying to kill them without reason. It turns out he was loaded up on meth and some strong narcotics and just freaked out.
It's hard to argue with that logic. I mean, if a person is going after you or your family, then, you have to defend them. So you were patient, and then you put a stop to the situation, so good. No jury would convict you anyway.
When I was in Afghanistan, there was an Afghani patrol getting shot up by the Taliban. I called in a helicopter gunship that was in the area. The Afghanis brought all the body parts back into the bed of a truck to show off what happened. I never wanted to see that. I murdered a kid in Fallujah, a young boy, maybe 8 years old. We were on patrol. We walked past a group of children playing, and in the midst of these children is another child, this child staring through me. His eyes were cold. I tried to just shrug it off. Hey, it's just a kid. Anyhow, when I passed by him, he stabbed me through the side. Before I could think clearly, I spun around and fired 3 rounds. He dropped. The worst thing for me is that even though he stabbed me with a makeshift shank, a piece of glass wrapped in a towel, and it required 37 stitches. It tore my skin when I turned because he was still grasping it. The wound was not life-threatening. It was a flesh wound, but it made my third time outside the wire, and as a 19-year-old kid myself, I was frantic and on edge. I still see his eyes sometimes when I first fall asleep. I never shared this with anyone. I received a Purple Heart for being combat wounded. They wrote up a commendation, and I also got a Navy Achievement Medal. I was treated like a staff member rather than a lance I was. I loathed that medal. I go to the DMV and they always ask me, every 4 years, if I want the Purple Heart plates for my vehicle or a DV plate. I always say no. People from my hometown treated me like some kind of hero when I first moved back. My best friend found out I received the Purple Heart from a girl I was seeing at the time, and in a small town, news travels quickly. Knowing why I received it and what I took from someone's parents eats me up. At the age of 11, my mom's drunk boyfriend decided this was the night he was going to kill her. At that age, when your mom is screaming for you to grab the knife, you just do it. I severed his spinal cord. I lived down the street from the apartment it happened in. I think about it daily on my way to work. During an uneventful evening, I got slashed badly in the belly by one of two guys trying to jump me. I was 20 kilograms lighter at 65 kg, 15 years younger, and didn't know any better. That was the first time I experienced having my consciousness fade in and out, mostly due to blood loss. I was shouting at the top of my lungs while trying to fight them off. Adrenaline kicked in early, so I could barely feel the pain, but the sensation of something slowly gushing out of somewhere shouldn't have terrified me. I only managed to turn the tide by taking the knife from the one that had it, by catching it through my right palm while guarding, then proceeded to stab him repeatedly in the face with it. The other perpetrator made a run for it as two guys walking by noticed us and decided to rush in to help. I was crying at this point, thinking I'd die that night. I didn't fall into a coma, but I was out for 3 whole days as soon as I felt that I was on a stretcher. I woke up with a lot of stitches and concerned faces. Everything hurt, and I had heavy bruising all around my noodle arms. That was also when I found out the police were at least able to catch the other guy, since he'd been a repeat offender. With him being thrown straight into jail, I couldn't care less what happened to him from then on, even less for the guy I just killed. It stays with me because I had body dysmorphia at the time, and having those injuries made it worse. I borrowed money from a friend to get my belly lasered, and while it did mentally help for a bit, it partly made it worse. Thankfully, I've grown out of it for many years now with lots of help, but I still think of that night every now and then. I've learned how to walk in an intimidating but confident manner ever since. While visiting my aunt and sick uncle on their farm for the weekend to help put up a security gate in their house due to an increase in crime in their neighborhood, I shot a guy trying to break down the newly installed security gate at around 3 a.m. I was woken up by my aunt and niece, who said they heard a noise by the back door and couldn't get my uncle out of bed. They asked me to go and look. Sure enough, there was someone trying to break the gate open. We shouted that there were people in here and to go away. He had the audacity to shout back that he knew, and he's still coming in. My aunt ran to fetch my uncle's revolver and wanted to shoot through the door. She was panicking and shaking, so I took the gun from her. Having shot it hundreds of times before, it felt like target practice. I shot 2 warning shots through the door, but at the feet. Both shots landed, one on his foot, causing him to fall down, and the second hitting him in the thigh, bleeding badly. He ran off and left a trail of blood. The body was found the next day by a neighbor hidden in his shed. What haunts me is the innocence of it all. I could have shot to kill, but I chose not to. Killed him anyway. Cops never questioned me once. About 15 years ago, I stopped by a small mom-and-pop grocery store in a very small town in which I lived. I put a few things on the counter, asked for a pack of cigarettes, and broke a 50. As I exited the store, I sensed someone behind me and held the door open behind me. I was walking down the sidewalk a few steps from the door when someone pushed me from behind. I turned around to see a man with a .357 in my face. He said, "Give me the money." As I was getting it out of my pocket, he said, "Hurry up or die." And I heard the click of the hammer being pulled back to the ready-to-fire position. There was no time to formulate a game plan. My right arm came up, and my hand pushed up on the underside of the barrel to push it out of my face. I had no idea what I would have done next. I didn't have to worry about it. The robber's finger was on the trigger. When I pushed the gun away, the gun fired, and the bullet hit him in the forehead to one side. As he went down, I remember the hair attached to the top of his head, hitting the tin on the side of the building and just sliding down. I just backed up a few steps and froze. As it turned out, he had put his grocery items on the counter without paying for them and followed me outside to rob me. I found out later that he had 4 times the amount of money in his pocket than the groceries would have cost him. Of course, I went to jail for the night, but was released the next afternoon on a signature bond. There were 4 witnesses outside the store and 2 lifelong residents of the area. It didn't take long for the detectives to do their interviews. My story, as well as the stories of the other stories of the witnesses who were interviewed separately, were all practically identical. Almost a month later, I appeared on my court date prepared to represent myself or ask for a court-appointed lawyer. The witnesses were there for support, as was a state attorney, the detectives, and a few other suit-and-tie people. I have no idea who they were. This hearing was held in a closed judge's chambers. Long story short, it was recommended that the case be ruled self-defense and all charges be dropped. The judge said the court would recess for 1 hour, and he asked me if I had anything to say to aid in my defense. I struggled to find some words, and when I did, I simply told the judge that I did not kill that man. His wrongful decision to rob me instead of spending his own money is what killed him. That is why my plea will stand as not guilty if these proceedings continue. The case was dismissed. I didn't lose any sleep over the robber. I wish it had never happened, but the only thing that still haunts me is the hair sliding down the side of the store building. I've never killed someone in self-defense, but I have assisted with euthanasia twice. It weighs very heavily on me, even though it was done out of mercy. The biggest recurring thought I have is, when I woke up that day, I didn't think ending someone's life was going to be on my to-do list. For reference, I work for the Department of Veteran Affairs. I often hear stories from our vets who were forced to do some awful things, and those weigh on me as well. I'm currently on medication for PTSD. I was a Marine on deployment at the time, deployed during the Second Iraq War. It was very late and dark, but you could still see, just not really well. Our small patrol convoy was wrapping up. We're leaving some towns soon. We stopped for a while so some people could talk to us. I'm watching my area, my sector, and some non-uniformed civilian wearing a chucklehead about 50 yards away raised his rifle and shot a couple rounds at me. They both went a few feet over my right shoulder. I went from high and ready to kneeling the instant I saw the flash, and I shot back, dropped him, and dropped the guy next to him who was moving to grab the other guy's rifle. It was dark behind them. We took some rounds from the rear and shortly later from the front too, but I kept my eyes on my sector in case more were coming. I never got to see the guys I dropped up close. I never got the story. We just left and received pop shots from the building window. I get really uptight feelings about it, guarded. In some ways, it was simpler to know you might get shot and it was your responsibility to fight back aggressively. It makes me feel like there's a mix of people that wouldn't be missed if they died fighting. Just another body. Alive 1 minute, dead the next. Not precious. I don't understand why they act like they do. Nothing at all. I'm not a psycho. I just have a healthy respect for my life and the lives of those I love, and a healthy disrespect for those who might harm myself or those that I love. When I was much younger, I lived in a kind of crappy apartment complex. I had a 12-gram shotgun riot gun. Think like Sarah Connor's in Terminator 2. Pistol grip and shortened barrel. It was always under my bed. It was part of a sectional, so there was just enough room to slide the gun under there. My roommate had just moved out a few days before, but I let him keep his truck in our covered parking spot. A few days before, he was a pizza delivery guy. He had been delivering to an apartment complex right by ours, and he told the guy no. The guy threatened him, so he put the pizza down and kicked the shit out of the punk. The punk was stoned, according to my roommate. Well, It turned out the punk was a gangbanger and told some shit stains new to the gang to kill him. It took a few days, and they realized his truck was in the complex next door. It was distinctive. So I got home from working overnight. I had class in a few hours and just laid down. Suddenly, someone kicked in my door. I grabbed the shotgun and opened the bedroom door. 3 effers are coming into my apartment with handguns, so I shoot. The first blast kills the one in front, the second kills the others, and the third badly wounds the third. He turns and heads down the stairs. Now, 2 cops live next door. They were getting ready for work and heard my door being kicked in. By the time they were on our shared landing, I had shot both times. They saw the third guy, bloody and effed up, heading down the stairs. They yell at him to drop his gun. He turned, raising his gun, and they shot him once each. I was questioned, but not detained. They took my shotgun, but it was later returned to me. The neighbors later told me that all 3 were wanted for armed robberies, in which 2 clerks were shot, 1 died, and the other was in serious condition. He lived, but not a good life due to his injuries. 2, maybe all 3, this is some 40 years ago, were wanted for R-ing a 15-year-old girl. They were all carrying stolen handguns that had been used in several violent crimes where the gun had been fired and a bullet was recovered. They did not think these 3 committed all of the crimes, but they were massive shit stains. I've never lost a moment of peace over this. They were violent animals, and violent animals need to be put down. They were willing to kill my ex-roommate because a gangbanger higher up lost a crappy fight over a pizza. These guys were pieces of shit. I do not think of the shit I have had either. If it is self-defense, and you warrant that lethal force should be a viable tactic, then it's better by God warranted. It should be your last resort. Had they not had guns, I would have held them until the neighbors came over, or hold them and call the cops. Had they never come to my apartment, I would have done nothing, but they did, and they came to kill. What would you have done?